here today. So we're going to talk a lot today about product ownership, specifically what makes for awesome product owners. Now, the origin of this whole talk from here today is through a lot of the classes that I teach. I usually get the question, okay, we've talked about the process, we've talked about the procedures of all these kind of different things and the framework, but really, what does it take to be kind of that great product owner? And so what I thought I would do for today is kind of throw together a mishmash of a bunch of different topics. So we're going to be kind of all over the place here. So I appreciate your patience in advance as I kind of bounce around a bunch of different topics about some of the things that we've been talking about in specifically my product ownership classes and what I've been talking with my executive teams about truly what makes an awesome product owner. And so hopefully out of this short 40 minutes little session that we're going to have today, and we will have some time for some Q&A and stuff like that towards the end and after the class as well. You've got my contact information that I'll share and things like that. I am one of the trainers here at Hyperdrive, and so you can always get a hold of me through Hyperdrive as well. But today, what we're going to really look at is product ownership and the characteristics of truly what it takes to be that great product owner. And so we're just going to do just kind of like a quick recap of some of those broad product owner responsibilities, kind of do a quick hit through that. And then I'm going to go through 5 different areas that, from my opinion, being both a prior product owner in the past, as well as the things that I hear and teach, again, with my clients, 5 different characteristics areas that really kind of make an awesome product owner. I've also created a little self-assessment, and you're going to get a link to that self-assessment. And actually, through the webinar that we have today, I'm going to have you go to that self-assessment. And we'll take about, 30 seconds, in each little block here for you to look through those kind of questions and kind of get familiar with the assessment so that you can actually go back and take it later. So with that, let's go ahead and get into some content here. And we're going to, again, start with that kind of broad, high-level overview of the product owner role and what some of those responsibilities might be. Now, when it comes to defining a product owner, sometimes what I like to do is actually go back to the Scrum Guide. I actually think this is a pretty good general definition of product owners, as we can see from Jeff and Ken. Product owner being accountable for maximizing the value of the product resulting from the work from the entire Scrum team. And here's what makes this both maddening and exciting all at the same time, because one of the first lines that you'll see in the Scrum Guide is Scrum is a framework that is purposefully incomplete. So how people become great product owners is incredibly variable. How it's done, it's going to vary widely, depending on the product, the industry, your customers, the maturity of your industry, the maturity of your customers, and all these different factors that are going on in the world today. And so there's no one way to do this product ownership. And so instead of saying, okay, you need to do this process or this procedure, what I like to do is think about characteristics of great product owners. And I think if we kind of take that step back and look at those characteristics instead of this specific thing or this specific thing, it can help guide us into how we can really perform better as a product owner. And if you're a manager or a Scrum Master, even an executive, this is how you can support product owners within your organization. Now, before I kind of go on, I just want to do 2 little other quick definitions, before we kind of get into it. And one of those is, in and of itself, what is a product? Because I hear a lot, even to this day, even in 2022, Agile and Scrum, it's all about software, right? That's all it's good for. No, I would say most of my work, and especially what I've been doing with like Hyperdrive and some other folks, more than half has been outside of software. And so when we think about what is a product, again, I'm going to go back to the Scrum Guide here. Product is simply this. It is that vehicle to deliver value. Now, this is a little abstract. It's got a clear boundary, known stakeholders, well-defined users, and customers. But what I really want to come back out of this is that it's that product that delivers value to somebody to solve a problem, whatever that problem is for you. And so that product could be a service, could be a physical product, could be hardware, could be software. Or what I like this saying out of the Scrum Guide, something more abstract. I'm not sure what that would be. But, when we're starting again to talk about what is product and product ownership, it's all around delivering value. And that's going to be one of those main things that we're going to really focus on. Value, value, value. We might even turn that into a little bit of a adult beverage drinking game every time I say value here. All right. Now, when it comes to kind of like delivering that value, there's a little map I like to share with, what is a product owner? What do they do all day? So let me do a little build here of, from my experience, what does a product owner do all day? Well, everything kind of starts with a product owner of truly being a master of their domain, really understanding what is their market, what are their drivers. Maybe they work with market researchers, maybe they do research on their own, but truly understanding the market. And once we have that market understanding, we can kind of figure out, okay, what are some of those solution areas? What are some of those things that we might want to look at to help solve some of those grand industry problems? I want to get towards some sort of product vision. And sometimes when I have that product vision, I want to start thinking about, okay, if I've got this product, who are my stakeholders who are going to actually consume it? Is it an end customer? Is it internal folks? Who are the people that are going to be impacted by this? And so sometimes when I have that product vision, and then I start drilling down into who are those people, I find that I get a little feedback loop here. These two things might iterate on each other. So now once I understand a vision and the personas, the people who I'm going to impact, I need to start thinking about, okay, what might those goals be? What's the problem that we're trying to specifically solve? And when I start to do that, it's going to then start to do some feedback loops into the product vision and then the personas in and of itself. And then sometimes I have to go back and do even more research to kind of figure out how to get all these things to align. And once I have these four things in alignment, I start to think about, okay, what does success for my product in and of itself look like? How am I going to measure that? What are those metrics going to be? How can I use some influence between people who are in my industry for my product, along with maybe some neighboring industries, neighboring products? What do they measure? How can that influence? And once I have those five things together, for me, what I personally do is I start to get a little bit more tangible. Okay, what does this mean? And for me, that comes in the form of listing out features. Again, features could be for either a product, service, hardware, software, whatever it means from you. And sometimes when I start listing out those features and it becomes tangible, I start to get more feedback loops back into goals, maybe back into the vision. So now I've got 6 things that I need to kind of make sure that I have in alignment. Then with all that work that I have there, I figure out, okay, what should I do first? And then I start doing product roadmaps. What are those things that I really need to focus in on now? What are those things that might be able to wait a little bit longer? What can I do next? And what are those things that I can do later? And this is what I'm calling all my homework. This is all the things that's going to provide me context for the actual line item work that we need to get done. This is my homework. Once we have all this, then at this point, we can start getting into a product backlog. Unfortunately, I see a lot of people start here at the product backlog first without doing a lot of this homework. And we're going to talk about that as one of my top tips here for being a great product owner, doing your homework. So once I've got my product backlog and I'm starting to break things down into stuff that I might want to do now, things I might want to do later or in the future, I'm going to start to even break that down into some backlog items, And then once I get those backlog items, I'm going to sort them in a specific order. And now I actually have some tangible work things that my Scrum team can work on as part of a normal Scrum cycle. Anywhere from starting off with the sprint planning, running through with it as a product owner. I am there for my daily scrums. I want to be there for my daily scrums. I want to see how things are moving along. Ultimately, from a sprint review, getting feedback on the product. And sometimes that feedback on the product gets me feedback on my features, sometimes on my personas, and even sometimes back into my market research from that sprint review. Then, of course, we've got a retro. How do we make things better for ourselves, which would feed back into the next sprint planning. And so when you take a look at everything a product owner has to do, look at the broad set of skills and capabilities that's required to do this really, really well. I mean, to be a good product owner, it's simple as just doing all those things all at once, right? And that's what we're going to talk about here. I'm going to kind of dabble around a little bit into this diagram and kind of show you some areas that really, to truly be that great product owner, here are some things I really want you to worry about. All right, so let's get into those 5 different areas. So those 5 different areas that we're going to talk about today are really about making sure you've got that industry or domain knowledge. That's the first thing that we're going to talk about. And then we're going to talk about 2 different things that we need to really focus in on in terms of collaboration, because our collaboration skills that we're going to use with our customers and our stakeholders, the people consuming our product, they're defining value, might be just a slightly different than some of the collaboration techniques that we might use with the people creating our solutions, and that's the product development team. So we're going to talk about collaboration from a couple different perspectives. And then once we have 1, 2, and 3 down, then we're going to talk a little bit about product backlog management, and then some just general mindset things afterwards. All right, so ready to go into number 1? I'm hearing yes. All right, let's go into number 1. And so industry knowledge. And so again, as a product owner, you're there to maximize value. And in order to really, truly maximize value, believe it or not, you kind of have to know what you're talking about. Whether it's, domain knowledge, if you're in manufacturing, if you're in the entertainment business, if you're into medical devices, biotechnology, finance, food and beverage service, marketing, whatever your industry is, you need to know what that industry is. And when I'm saying you need to have a broad understanding of your domain, what I'm talking about are some of the things that you see on the screen here. What's the history of your market? Is it something that's new? Is it something that's evolving? Or has it been something that's been around for a while, several cycles? What are the drivers of your market? How fast does your market move? I mean, especially within the, we're going to talk about VUCA here, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, the speed at which a lot of the organizations are running at today. Think about the things that we did when we first entered COVID, things that we did mid-COVID, things that we're doing now. Chances are they're all a little bit different. And so speed of market and what your industry reacts to that speed becomes essential. When you have that, you can understand your challenges, your opportunities, understanding your competition, who are your main players, what are they doing? All those things, having that knowledge is going to be incredibly useful for you to be a really impactful product owner. Now, knowing about it is only part of the equation. I mean, clearly with my degrees and my kind of love for research, I love to read things, but sometimes having the actual experience within your domain becomes absolutely essential, because when you have that experience, you've lived it, you've felt it. Let me give you a couple experiences that did not go well for me. So for example, there was one time I was a product owner for a medical application. And it was a application that we were working on that required you to be a medical doctor or a nurse practitioner. I am not a medical doctor. I am not a nurse practitioner. And so when it came to a really essential sprint review, when we were basically presenting to the people who were going to purchase our product, I actually very poorly did some really nonsensical scenarios. I used bad data. And so I just didn't know. I just didn't know. And so by me through that sprint review, not using proper terms, using a scenario that would just never come to play in a real world medical application, the customer lost confidence in me. They liked me, but they said, Steve, you're an idiot. People in the South, bless your heart. Bless your heart. All right. Yeah. They lost confidence in me, our team, and our overall solution that we were trying to do. So even though I knew of the industry, I didn't know the industry. Now, there was another customer that I was working with, that I was a coach with. And for this company, it took us 6 sprints, 6 tries at a solution to get something that the stakeholder actually wanted. I just remember after the first sprint, yep, nope. Second sprint, nope. Third sprint, nada. Fourth sprint, yeah, still no. Took us 6 tries to get even close to what the customer actually wanted. Now, I did do this transparently with the VP of product. He wanted to teach his product team a lesson. They were really overconfident, and the stakeholders were in on it. It was the team that we were doing this with. So they were the one being experimented with. So it wasn't we just, said nope 6 times in a row. But we felt it was really important for this group to say, you need to know what it is that you're talking about, because without that domain knowledge, without experience, the POs, you can really become that list generator, that order taker. Just do this and put it in there, and not understanding the big old question. We hear that from Simon, I believe Sinek, if I'm pronouncing that right, starting with why. Why are we doing this in the first place, instead of just putting it on the list? And in my case, without my domain knowledge and experience, I did more damage than good with that particular thing. All right. So having that domain knowledge is absolutely essential. And part of having that domain knowledge is also knowing where in the product lifecycle you are. What we see on the screen here is a normal product adoption curve. And so what you'll see here is from our early market folks, which is less than 15% of the general population, the people who want those newest things, they tend to be okay with trying something out, being part of a beta, experimenting with an A or a B solution, trying out some things. But the time that we, quote, cross this chasm and we get into the mainstream market, which is more than 85% of the market, their tolerance for experimentation, levels of quality, there are expectations, with that. So knowing where you are in your product development lifecycle in and of itself can really focus you in on the items that should be in your backlog in the first place. So know where you are for your product in your industry. A couple more tips here. Product vision. I can't tell you how many times I'll go into a company and I'll say, oh, this is fantastic. You've got this wonderful product backlog. You've got very excited folks that are working on this. You've got excited customers. Why are you doing this? What's the problem you're trying to solve? And there's not a product vision. So having a product vision, why are we building this? What's our north? What's our true north for this? I've even had companies call this their North Star, or sometimes it's their North Star document. Without this, it's really hard to, quote, anchor some decisions. What's the order of my backlog? Where should I be focusing on first? What are those items of true highest value? When I get interrupted from other things, how does it compare with my vision? Unless you have that product vision, it becomes really hard for a product owner to really manage their backlog in and of itself. Now, it's not unusual when I say, okay, you should have a product vision. The question I usually get right after that is, what role does a PO play in establishing a product vision? Well, in this case, it depends. I do have some additional references back at the end of the presentation. It's going to be available. I'm going to be making this, slide deck available to you. There's many different arguments. Well, who should be creating the product vision? Is it a product manager? Is it a VP of product? Is it somebody from business? Should it be somebody from technology because it's a tech product? It depends. So I don't have a big answer for you, but I do know if one is missing, get one. You may have to chat and collaborate with some other folks in order to establish one, but having a strong product vision can really help guide a lot of the discussion that's out there. All right, so like I said, with this presentation, I'm going to be talking about a lot of different characteristics of great product ownership. But what I tried to do is put this into a little bit of a self-assessment. And let me share with you a self-assessment that's going to be available to you. I actually want you, if you don't mind, we can kind of click into the link here, and let me grab the link, and I'll put the link into the chat window. Here we go. There's the link in the chat window in Zoom down below. This is to my webpage where I've got a bunch of different resources that are free available to you. Use them, tell your friends, just say, hey, it came from Doc Martin. And so just do that. With that, one of those is characteristics of great product owners. And so if you just kind of click into that, you'll notice in here, I've got 5 different sections within this little self-assessment. And that first section that we just went over was that domain knowledge or industry knowledge. The way that you just do any of my assessments, I don't do things on a scale of 1 to 5 and then tally up points. Y'all are too smart for that. I just want you to look for patterns. So just kind of take a look at these first 6 questions on your own. Take about 30 seconds or so as I kind of take a look at the chat window here for any questions. Just like for you to kind of go through and just think to yourselves, how strongly do you agree or disagree with each one of those statements that you see here in section 1? All right, so let me just give you a few seconds to just take a look at section 1 there. Yeah, it's that, Maru, I see your question in there. Yeah, it's that first one there. So from the resources page, it's this characteristics of great product owners. That's what it is. All right, so I'll let you kind of take a look at that, and thank you for the reminder. Yes, I did forget that attribution to Jeffrey Moore. So before I publish this, I'll get that out there for that Crossing the Chasm. Good book, by the way. All right, so that's the first area. The second area that we really want to take a look at is just to make sure that, again, we've got some collaboration skills. And the first set of collaboration skills that I want to take a look at is really with the customer or the stakeholder collaboration skills. And before I kind of go into this, just want to do kind of a quick reminder of our good friend here, the Agile Manifesto. I mean, you can't come to an Agile talk without talking about the manifesto, right? I think it's almost required to do that. But what we're going to really focus in on here are those 3rd and 4th statements, all about customer collaboration. Of course, we need these things over on the right-hand side, but we're going to emphasize things such as customer collaboration over contract negotiation. And we're going to tap a little bit into responding to change versus following a plan. Because I can guarantee you, not only are we going through a lot of changes, but our customers as well. Now, speaking of change, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, we're living in this really VUCA environment, which stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. Volatility, things just rapidly changing, being uncertain with some different things that we could possibly do. I think we're seeing, even in the world today, how intertwined and how complex things are, how we're pulling some things together right? There's a lot of complexity that's out there. And even when we have choices, our choices were kind of ambiguous on what choice do we want to take. And so when we start thinking about, okay, what is value? What is the product? Knowing that there's so much change going on out there, when we start thinking about collaboration, and maybe I can have some folks here either raise their hand or put some thoughts in the chat window. I want to talk a little bit about customer collaboration. You know, maybe it's something I can maybe tap into either Tom or Jim to maybe get us started, some of their colleagues at Hyperdrive. You know, when we start talking about what does good collaboration look like, what might be some of those words or some of those thoughts that you might have when it comes to really good customer collaboration? I'm kind of curious. What do you think? So I saw Tom, you come off mute there.
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking, you know, I like collaboration. When really good collaboration is happening, I see a lot of energy. I see small groups. I see people getting excited, and I see lots of ideas being generated. So, you know, this is, I think of small conference rooms with lots of whiteboards and lots of stuff on the whiteboard. Yeah, a safe space. I think there's some great ideas that are popping up there in the chat.
Yeah, so we see a lot of great things. I'm not sure if I can call him either Jim or other Steve, you know, of what they see, you know, stakeholder management, consistent collaboration, openness, transparency, honesty, inclusion, open-ended questions, absolutely safe. Yeah, absolutely. And so those are a lot of themes that I see out there as well. Let me go ahead and share my screen here. All right, there is my button. There's my button again. There we go. All right. So when we start talking about collaboration, all those various aspects that we have just talked about, it kind of comes down to one of those key things that I think about when it comes to true collaboration. Because ultimately, when it comes down to it, one of the true currencies that any product owner has is this: trust. In order to get to that openness, in order to get to that safe space to talk through things, it's really to have that trust. So that amazing collaboration leads to great trust. And again, when you've got that trust of your stakeholders, you can have those courageous, open, and very respectful discussions about whatever it is that you need to get done. And those are the conversations that we absolutely need to have, especially when we start talking about working in this vastly changing world today. Now, there are some characteristics that I think are essential when it comes to being a really good collaborator with our customers. And let's do this here. I'm going to go back to our little, let me see if I can minimize that. There we go. I'm going to go back to our little assessment here. I'm going to look at the second section. Customer collaboration. Let me make this just a little bit bigger, so maybe we can read it a little bit better. So I just want you to scan through this section and see if there's anything here popping out at you as like, yeah, these are some key things here. Take a look at that self-assessment. How are you doing with those? Yeah. Rachel, thank you so much for your comment. Yeah, it's so incredibly important to say no in a very diplomatic, respectful way. Curious from this group, how do you say no without saying no? What's a technique or a phrase you may have used? Yeah, Jim.
Hey, thanks for contributing that idea. I'm going to put it on the product backlog. If you're not happy with where it is on the product backlog, let's have a conversation about the other things that are already on there and how we might reprioritize.
Absolutely. That's awesome. Thanks, Jim. Yeah. There's a when through in there. Yes, and, offering a different technique. Yeah, that's a very popular way. Yeah. Other ways have you seen how to say no without saying no? Any others? I'll definitely share a couple and some additional references afterwards today. I think I saw Tom come off mute there. Was there something that you wanted to say?
I was just thinking one way of saying no is to say, yes, we'll put it on the product backlog. It's right down there below 500.
Yeah, I remember there was one company that I went to, and when I looked at their backlog, I'm like, yes, you got a backlog. And we kept scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. I just looked at the VP of product, I'm like, how many items do you have in here? He goes, yeah, I think we got about 2,000. All right, where do these go back to? Oh, they went back 4 and 5 years prior. I'm like, are you actually going to do all those? No. Then why are they here? Well, I don't like to say no. Well, I don't like to say no either. But there's ways to say no without saying no, And I love what some folks there. Here's a current list of priorities schedules. What should we shift to get those? So see how we're doing this? Great POs know how to take some factual things and just kind of, I call it jujitsu. We're going to kind of throw it back around in such a way. Gosh, that almost looked like one of those Marvel characters, just going to throw it around back towards them and offer it back to you, given all these other things. What would you like to do? Give the power back to, if you will, the people making these requests. Absolutely. All right, so we've got 3 more things that I just want to kind of talk through here. So I just want to make sure that we're respectful of that time. And so let me get back into item area number 3. And this is product development collaboration. And so we know that there's going to be some certain things that we need to do with our customers and our stakeholders, but we're also going to need to do some collaboration with our teams in and of themselves. And so in this case here, those statements I'm going to be really focusing in on those individuals and interactions over process and tools, knowing that we do need to have some process and tools. I love stealing this from Jeff Sutherland all the time, having that minimum viable bureaucracy, minimum viable process. We are a business, but focusing more on those individuals' interactions just gets us there a little bit quicker in our understanding. And getting into, of course, the Agile Manifesto for software development is about working software, generalizing this a little bit more, working product, increments of working product. So I'm going to ask the same question for you, but we're going to see if we can do just a slightly subtle difference here. I'd like to hear from some folks here. When we start talking about collaboration with our product development team, we're going to naturally do some very similar things: openness, transparency, respect, of course, as we would do with our stakeholders. But what might be something about collaborating with a product development team, the people creating our solutions, that might be a little bit different? Just kind of curious, what do you think? What does good collaboration look like with product development teams? So I'm not sure if, Jim, if that's still a hand from earlier today.
Oops, sorry about that. But I'll go ahead and jump in. It's about, hey, here are the problems that are most important and would be the most valuable to solve. So what do you think? How can these be tackled? Which ones do you want to tackle? That sort of thing. But definitely starting with a vision of what are the problems out there in the market that would be valuable to solve, and you'd be heroes if you did.
Yeah. And what I'm also hearing with that, Jim, is that concept of engagement. We've all heard this, and I've got a white paper coming out. In fact, shameless plug. You'll hear from me again in June about a research paper I'm getting ready to publish on engagement. The more that you're engaged with something, you're going to tend to get better solutions, intrinsic buy-in. You don't need to get buy-in because they're already engaged. Better quality, more innovation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. As VG is kind of throwing in there, the brainstorming, it kind of gets you in there, understanding, like Rachel's saying, if we understand the risks and dependencies, if they're involved in that process, that buy-in is just intrinsically there. You don't need to get it. They're already collaborating with you. And that's going to be one of those really key things as a product owner. One of my mistakes early on in my career as a product owner is I was a really mediocre developer. There's a reason why I'm not a technologist anymore. Okay, terrible. I was terrible. But I knew enough to be dangerous. And so I would go into my development teams with, do it this way, do it this way, do it this way. Of course, there are certain rare, okay, when you play this back, I'm saying rare circumstances where you just need to do it this way. You just need to. But the more that we can actually say, here's the problem, here's the opportunity area, or for some of my projects, here's the challenge that we need to solve. All right, I can get that intrinsic buy-in by them engaged in the process. And that's what really gets us from a product development team collaboration. And so when we look at it from that perspective, there's a couple of things that our product development team is going to need to know, such as, okay, what's a sequence of activities? Remember that diagram I had at the very beginning, establishing product roadmaps? What do we need to work on now? What do we need to work on next? What do we need to work on later? All right, if we have an idea of what those general buckets are, we've got that really nice strategic communication tool that kind of offers not only a strategy and thought of what it is that we need to accomplish, but also execution of a strategy showing an evolution of that product over time. It's going to, again, help us align things, coordinate, focus, set an order, set our priorities, and ultimately get us into that shared ownership. The other thing that we also need to make sure that we have, especially as product owners working with our developers, our product development team, is making sure that we have enough time to work on things. There have been time motion studies that have gone back to the 1920s. We literally have a century's worth of time and motion studies. Here's what data from 100 years has shown us. We are terrible at multitasking. We are terrible. We are awful. We do not multitask. And so it is a fallacy for us to be able to multitask. And when we start to multitask, some of the more recent ones done in the last 10, 15 years show productivity decreases, lowers IQ points. There was one study that even compared multitasking and lowering IQ with, how shall I say, smoking a certain substance that might be legal, let's just say, in the state of either California, Colorado, or Massachusetts, just saying. It's on that order of magnitude. And how many times we are interrupted a day and how many hours that just kind of adds up. It's hard. It's so hard for us to focus on those things. And so if you're having a hard time focusing on those things, your collaboration with your team is going to have that hard time focus, and they're going to have a hard time focusing. Another thing that I'm seeing, especially as we are working remotely, and now, especially in the last month or two, we've got people going back into the office, and this concept of working in a hybrid environment is becoming more and more pervasive in the working environment today. So making sure that we can work in all these different ways. There's no one clear way for us to do that. And so let me just kind of offer 3 different views. These are 3 different views of working in a hybrid environment. I want you to take a look at these from different views and make something that's going to work for you in your environment. And then lastly, working with a development team, again, making sure that you know your process. Now, of course, as a certified Scrum trainer, I have a bias towards training. Okay, I own that. But I see time and time again, going back to that minimum viable bureaucracy comment, that I steal from Jeff Sutherland all the time, is if you don't have a true understanding of what that minimum process is, it's going to lead to a lot of drama. All right. So what I'd like for us to do now is we're just going to kind of just looking at our time here, I just want to highlight section number 3 in that assessment. Gets into product development team collaboration. Things that we've already talked about before in terms of openness, transparency, respect, spending time together, trust, and some other things here. So if you want to take a look at this after our little webinar today, take a look at section 3. This is how you can increase or take a look at some product ownership from a product development team perspective. Now, the next 2 areas, area number 4 and area number 5, the good news is we've covered a lot of this material already. So I think these next 2 little sections should be covered quickly. So if you've got some questions that you want to start throwing into that chat window that Tom and Steve can start looking at, feel free to throw some of those in there. So this next little area is all around product backlog management. I mean, of course, product backlog management is one of those things that you are accountable for as a product owner. And so, as I've been kind of sharing with you before, a lot of the folks that I work with, when they're having a lot of challenges with general product ownership, they jump right on into solutioning without really understanding the problem, who it impacts, what our goal is, what the market is, how we should sequence work, how we measure value in ourselves, how we measure success for ourselves. All that is missing. And so I want you to resist starting with that product backlog and really start working on those upstream things first that can inform what should go into your product backlog in the first place. All right. So if we do those other 3 things that I've already talked about today, having the domain knowledge, being able to collaborate with your stakeholders, being able to collaborate with your product development team, all those things are going to help you establish an appropriate product backlog that's going to be high impact for you. Couple other things. Great product owners that I work with their developers, the people creating your solutions, and they have, again, a couple key working agreements as part of working well together. They have a definition of done. They have something that I call definition of ready. Now, the Scrum Guide just says you need to have work that's ready. I usually coach folks, well, if you have a definition of done, we'll just have a definition of ready. Seems to kind of work well together. When should you start work? When is work complete? When can you release it? I also like to have 2 other working agreements, such as how do you add work into your product backlog? How do you do it? Who does it? When? Again, product owners accountable for a product backlog. It doesn't mean you have to do it alone. You can have other people add things in there, but what's your process? What's your procedure? How are you going to review those things that people put in there? Make sure you've got a very transparent working agreement with that. And then lastly, just be very transparent. What is the process you're going to use to set the order of your backlog? This is how I'm going to get to number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, etc. A couple other things. Again, don't do this alone. I typically, when I'm a product owner, I like to look at it from at least 3 different perspectives. I look for a diversity in thought. Again, decades of research shows when you have a diversity of thought, you tend to get more robust, better solutions. Now, it might be a little bit more challenging to work in an organization with a diversity of thought, but you actually tend to get a much better solution. 2 other things. Get comfortable with incremental delivery. It's not about the big bang. at the very end of a long time period. It's about doing things in small chunks and validating along the way your idea. So getting comfortable working with increments is absolutely essential for great product ownership. And then lastly, really want to understand the power and the influence that you have in how you set up work in the first place in your backlog. Whether you're using user stories, whether you're using a gherkin format, or whether you're just tasking things, whatever it is that you're using for your product backlog items, can you sequence things in your backlog to focus so you're not working on 18 things all at once? Can you write items in your backlog that requires two people to work together to get that collaboration within the team? So how you set up the work, there's some thought that we need to do as product ownership with that. So again, I'm throwing a lot of different concepts at you in this workshop. Again, all different characteristics of great product owners. If you take a look at part 4 of that assessment, and again, that assessment is this one over here, it kind of gets into some product backlog considerations. So again, I'll leave it for you after this class to take a look at some product backlog considerations. So our final area that we're going to talk about today, before we kind of wrap this up, is some just general characteristics. Now, one of those key things, there's a smattering of just kind of general characteristics. Number 1, being empowered. What we see from the Scrum Guide is this very simple but very powerful statement. For product owners to succeed, the organizations must respect their decisions. You must be empowered. Let me tell you a quick story. There was an organization that I was working with. They had 8 Scrum teams, 8 product owners. I was like, yes, this is looking really good. And when I started looking at all the individual product backlogs and I started working with the individual product owners, every single one of them said, hey, that's a great idea. Let me just run it by my VP. Great idea. Let me run it by my VP. Well, shoot, we have to run everything by our VP. Well, who is our product owner? It's not you. It's the VP. And that VP was never around. And so within a sprint or two, it became very apparent we were going to not hit our targets. Other couple things, being able to see both the forest, the big picture, and the detail, the trees at the same time, depending on who you're talking to. If I'm talking with my executives, we have to talk about things in general. What's the big picture? If I'm talking with my product development teams, chances are I might be talking about an individual tree and its relationship to the picture. You know, so being able to talk about those things, absolutely essential. Knowing that we all have a range of how we like to be communicated with. I love this saying from George Bernard Shaw. The biggest single problem in communication is the illusion that it's taken place, you know? And so just realizing that we've got a bunch of different ways to communicate. There's a great reference here if you want to take a little bit more look into that, take a look there. And then the last thing, what I'm going to call realistic positivity. You know, we want to be realistic with some things here. But the energy that we bring in as a product owner to our executives, to our stakeholders, to our customers, internal, external, to our product development teams, that energy that we bring in is the energy that we bring forward. Energy breeds the energy it has. So if you've got that realistic positivity, hey, I know things are challenged right now, but let's try this one thing, this one increment in this one area. I think we can do this. Build upon that. All right. So the last area here of that self-assessment, we're going to transition here shortly into some Q&A, is this section here, general product ownership mindset and capabilities. I've got 7 of those listed here. So if I were to kind of sum everything up here, again, my whole intention for today was just to kind of review that broad category. We can see how broad this is. And it's hard to be a really great product owner in all 5 of these areas all at once. And we see those areas here. But net, in all these different areas, what I really want you to kind of get down to is a really good product owner. Your currency is trust, and you'll see trust in that self-assessment multiple times. If you build that trust, if you have that openness, courage, respect, you're going to build that product that is really awesome. That's really awesome out there. With that, we've got just a couple minutes here. I know folks might have to drop at the top of the hour here. I'm more than happy to answer questions from folks that are here. So feel free to drop questions in there or use your little hand raise. More than happy to answer any questions. Also, feel free to link in with me anytime. Again, plug for my next webinar I'm going to do in combination with Hyperdrive is going to be in June about engagement. My little research paper with that. With that, I'm going to go ahead and stop share here.